Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The moment Jennifer started talking about her new boss making work miserable, something in my gut told me trouble was brewing. She'd always been more than capable, taking on extra responsibilities, keeping things running smoothly. But this time, something felt off. One evening, she came home looking completely drained. Her face was tight with frustration, and as soon as she sat down, the words spilled out. Her boss had dumped an entire department's workload on her shoulders. It was unfair, overwhelming, and she was at her breaking point. She'd even tried to rally her coworkers to push back against management, hoping for some kind of change. But instead of a victory, she ended up taking the fall. They fired her. I remember the way her voice cracked when she told me. She was devastated. And I did what any good husband would do. I reassured her that none of this was her fault. Toxic workplaces chew people up and spit them out. It had nothing to do with her skills or effort. Before she could even finish telling me the whole story, her phone rang. It was her friend, one of the coworkers she had been closest to at her old job. I only caught bits of their conversation, but when she hung up, I saw a hint of relief in her face. Maybe knowing she wasn't the only one who had walked away from that place helped ease the sting of losing her job. That night, I told her what I genuinely believed. Losing that job might turn out to be a blessing in disguise. No one deserves to be treated like a disposable worker. I was proud of her for standing up for herself, even if it hadn't gone the way she planned. She needed time to breathe, to reset. And I was going to be there for her, no matter what. Over the next couple of weeks, she focused on herself. She took long walks, reconnected with old coworkers, grabbed coffee with friends, and did her best to shake off the stress from the past. For the first time in a while, I saw her laugh like she meant it. It felt good to see her slowly reclaiming a sense of normalcy. Then, one day, she came home looking more excited than I'd seen her in weeks. My friend told me about a job opening at her new company, she said, her eyes lighting up. She thinks I'd be a perfect fit. I could hear the hope in her voice, and honestly, I wanted to share in her excitement. But something about the whole thing felt a little too vague. She didn't have many details yet, didn't even fully understand what the role was. I mean, she said she can set up a meeting for me, Jennifer continued, brushing off my hesitation. I'll find out more then. I asked the obvious question, where was this meeting happening? When she told me it was going to be at her friend's house, I felt my brow furrow. That was unusual. Not necessarily a red flag, but definitely not standard procedure. Still, I kept my thoughts to myself. She was so eager to move forward, and after everything she had been through, I didn't want to be the one to rain on her parade. I simply asked if she needed my help preparing, maybe practicing interview questions or updating her resume. She just smiled. Actually, could you just give me a ride there? It was an easy request. If it made her feel more comfortable, I wasn't going to hesitate. The meeting was set for 6 p.m. in a couple of days, and she planned to spend some time with her friend beforehand to iron out the details. We picked out a professional-looking outfit for her, and before bed that night, I reminded her of one thing. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. You're moving forward, and that's what matters. She smiled and squeezed my hand. And for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe things were finally falling into place. The evening of the meeting, Jennifer was a little nervous, but she carried herself with quiet determination. As I drove her to her friend's house, I reassured her. Just be yourself. If they're smart, they'll see what a great worker you are. She nodded, but I could tell she was deep in thought. When we arrived, I pulled up to the curb and watched as she stepped out of the car. Just as I was about to drive away, my phone buzzed. It was Jennifer. Hey, babe, she said. I forgot my handbag at home. Can you grab it for me? She sounded a little flustered, like she really needed it. Without a second thought, I turned the car around and headed back home. On the drive, I called one of my friends, just to pass the time. I casually mentioned that Jennifer was having a job interview at her friend's place. There was a pause. At her friend's house, he asked, his tone skeptical. Yeah, I replied. That's kinda weird, don't you think? I mean, she doesn't even know what the job is yet. I laughed it off. Maybe it's just a casual meet and greet. Yeah, maybe, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. And honestly, neither was I. By the time I got home, I was feeling a little uneasy. I grabbed her handbag and drove back to her friend's place. When I knocked on the door, her friend answered with a warm smile. "Oh, you didn't have to bring it all the way back," she said sweetly. She stepped aside and invited me in. "They're still talking about the job if you want to wait for a minute." I hesitated. I wasn't planning on staying, but curiosity got the best of me. I stepped inside. The house was neat, the atmosphere friendly, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. Inside, Jennifer was sitting with two people, a man and a woman, both dressed in expensive suits. The conversation sounded professional, but something about it felt off. The man introduced himself, shaking my hand firmly. I returned the gesture, doing my best to keep my expression neutral. They were talking about the job, explaining how it involved working with clients face-to-face in a comfortable, high-end environment. That sounded good in theory, but there were still no specifics. So I asked directly, "What exactly will her responsibilities be?" The man smiled, but his answer was vague. "Well, we'll go over all the details once she starts. But we're confident she'll do well here." That didn't sit right with me. Employers don't typically expect someone to commit before explaining the job in detail. But before I could push further, the conversation was already wrapping up. "Come in tomorrow, and we'll get you started," the woman said with a pleasant smile. That was it. No paperwork, no clear job description, just an eager invitation to jump right in. As the two of them left, I turned to Jennifer's friend. "So what exactly do you do here?" I asked her. She chuckled lightly. "Oh, I just work at reception. Your wife will be doing something different, but don't worry, it's nothing too complicated." I nodded, but I wasn't reassured. Jennifer, on the other hand, looked hopeful. She was excited about this opportunity, and I didn't want to be the one to crush that hope. So, I kept my concerns to myself. As we drove home, Jennifer was buzzing with energy. "They seemed really nice," she said, smiling. "I think this could be a fresh start for me." I glanced at her, keeping my thoughts to myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overthinking things. But something deep inside me told me that this wasn't a fresh start. It was the beginning of something much worse. The next morning, Jennifer was up early, getting ready for her first day at the new job. I sat on the bed, watching her as she pulled an outfit from the closet. That's when I noticed it. She had chosen something far more revealing than what she used to wear to work. A tight skirt, a low-cut blouse, nothing outrageously inappropriate, but definitely not the kind of thing she would have worn to her old office job. I raised an eyebrow. "Is that really necessary?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She sighed, already anticipating my reaction. "Look, first impressions matter. If dressing a certain way makes things easier for me, why not?" I didn't like the way she said that. She caught my expression and added, "It worked in my last job. People treat you better when they find you attractive. If it makes my job less stressful, I don't see the harm." I didn't argue. Maybe I was overreacting. So, I let it go. She kissed me on the cheek and headed out the door, leaving me with an uneasy feeling that I couldn't quite shake. That day felt impossibly long. I distracted myself with work, house chores, anything to keep my mind from spiraling. But that nagging feeling of doubt stuck with me. By the time Jennifer got home, she looked exhausted, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her expression. I asked her how her first day went. "It was good," she said, kicking off her heels. "The people are nice. I'm working with two other girls, and we get along well." That was a relief. But then she added something that made my stomach tighten. "You know, they actually made a comment about me not shaving my legs perfectly. Apparently, everything has to be flawless." I frowned. "What? That's ridiculous. Why would that even matter?" She just shrugged, giving a half-smile. "It's part of the image, I guess." That didn't sit right with me at all. But she didn't seem too bothered by it, so I let it go, again. That evening, I got a call from some of my friends and family. They were planning a small get-together the next day, a chance to unwind and catch up. "Looks like we've got a busy day tomorrow," I told Jennifer. "We'll visit my parents in the afternoon, then have some friends over in the evening." She hesitated for a second, but then smiled. "That sounds nice. I could tell she was still processing her first day, but I figured a little time with family and friends would be good for both of us. Maybe it would help take my mind off the strange feeling I had about this job. That night, as we got ready for bed, I glanced at Jennifer, feeling an overwhelming urge to ask again. "You're sure you're okay with everything?" I asked. "Tomorrow might be busy, but it should be fun." She gave me a tired smile. "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm looking forward to it." I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed her. Something felt wrong. I just didn't know how wrong it really was. The next day, we arrived at my parents' house around noon. As soon as we walked through the door, the familiar scent of home-cooked food filled the air. My parents were thrilled to see us, immediately ushering us to the dining table. Lunch started off light, catching up, sharing stories, the usual family talk. But it didn't take long before my mom, ever the curious one, turned her attention to Jennifer's new job. "So, tell us about the new place," she said, her tone casual but with a sharpness that told me she was fishing for details. Jennifer hesitated for a split second before responding. "Oh, it's going great," she said, keeping her voice upbeat. "I'm working with clients, just making sure everything runs smoothly for them." I saw my mom's eyes narrow slightly. She wasn't satisfied with that answer. "What kind of clients?" she pressed. "And what exactly do you do for them?" Jennifer glanced at me, almost as if she was silently asking for help. But I knew my mother. If she sensed hesitation, she'd only dig deeper. Jennifer finally gave a vague response. "I assist with special requests, making sure their needs are met." My dad chimed in, his curiosity piqued. "Sounds interesting. Any specific types of requests?" Jennifer let out a soft chuckle, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Oh, it's just making sure everyone is comfortable. Nothing too complicated." I could tell she was trying to keep things vague, but my parents weren't the type to drop a topic easily. They exchanged a glance, clearly finding her answers unsatisfying, but eventually, the conversation moved on to other things. I kept my mouth shut, but my unease only grew. After lunch, we said our goodbyes and got in the car. I drove, sneaking glances at Jennifer every now and then. She was staring out the window, quiet. I decided to ask directly. "You seemed uncomfortable back there." She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "It's just, we're not really supposed to talk about the job. Company rules." That answer made me pause. "Why not?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She shrugged. "That's just how it is. They want everything to stay private." I nodded slowly, filing that information away in my mind. When we got home, we barely had time to settle in before our friends started arriving for the get-together. Like my parents, they were eager to hear about Jennifer's new job. And just like before, she gave the same vague responses. "It's going well," she said with a polite smile. "I work with a great team." She never once gave an actual job description. Something wasn't adding up. Later that night, after our guests left, Jennifer let out a sigh of relief. "Well, at least that's over," she said with a small laugh. I nodded but didn't say much. Then she mentioned something that made my ears perk up. "I think I'll be getting my first paycheck soon." "Well, at least an advance." That was fast. She had only been working there a few days. I looked at her, seeing the excitement in her eyes. She was happy. I wanted to believe that this job was just a weird but harmless opportunity. I wanted to trust her. But my gut was telling me that something wasn't right. And I was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. A few days later, Jennifer mentioned that she was meeting up with her friend after work. I figured that was a good thing. She'd been busy lately, and I wanted her to have some time to relax. As for me, a couple of my buddies invited me out for drinks, so I decided to join them. It had been a while since we all hung out, and I was looking forward to unwinding. At first, the conversation was light, just the usual talk about work, sports, and life. But then, one of the guys brought up something that caught my attention. "Hey, you guys ever hear about that new place in town?" he said, lowering his voice slightly. "It's one of those, underground spots. Men go there, and, well, let's just say they get what they pay for." The other guys chuckled, but I frowned. "You mean, like, a brothel?" one of them asked. "Sort of," my friend said. But it's more discreet. No face-to-face interactions. Just a woman on one side of a wall, and the guy on the other. No names. No talking. Just, well, you get it. The conversation made me uncomfortable. Another guy raised an eyebrow. Where the hell did you even hear about this? My buddy told me about it, he said with a shrug. Apparently, it's for guys who can't get what they want at home. They all laughed, but I sat there, unsettled. Something about this place, about the way it was described, bothered me more than I could explain. I pushed it out of my mind and focused on finishing my drink. Later that night, when I got home, Jennifer was already there. I told her about the weird conversation I had with my friends. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. That's awful, she said, shaking her head. Places like that are disgusting. I'd never set foot in one of those, even if someone offered me $1 million. Her reaction was exactly what I expected. Of course, my wife wouldn't be involved in something like that. And yet, something still felt off. I didn't say anything more about it, but before bed, Jennifer brought up something surprising. Oh, by the way, she said, her tone suddenly lighter. Since my friend and I have been so close for so long, we decided to get matching tattoos. I blinked. Matching tattoos. She nodded, looking a little excited. Yeah, just something small. It's a fun reminder of our friendship. It wasn't something I expected from her, but I didn't want to dampen her enthusiasm. Would you come with me? She asked, her eyes hopeful. Just for support. I hesitated for a moment, but then shrugged. Sure. I'll come with you. The next day, we went to the tattoo parlor. Jennifer and her friend spent a long time picking out the design. Eventually, they settled on something small but intricate, a little symbol that supposedly meant sisterhood or something like that. When it was Jennifer's turn, I sat next to her, holding her hand while the artist worked. It was during that moment of quiet that I decided to ask more about her job. So, how's everything going over there? I asked casually. Her friend, who had been scrolling on her phone, looked up and smiled. Oh, your wife is killing it at work. Seriously, she might be Employee of the Month soon. Jennifer chuckled, a little embarrassed but pleased by the compliment. I smiled, but I still had that nagging feeling. So, what exactly do you do again? I asked, trying to sound casual. Jennifer tilted her head slightly, then smiled. We fulfill wishes. Mostly for men. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I nodded, pretending not to think too much of it. Interesting. She didn't elaborate. After the tattoos were done, we left the shop, and I tried to push my concerns aside. Jennifer was in good spirits, laughing with her friend, and I didn't want to ruin her mood. But later that night, when we got home, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Jennifer had gone to wash her hands, and her phone started ringing from inside her bag. She called out for me to grab it. I reached for her bag, but as I did, I noticed something tucked inside. A small, nearly full bottle of birth control pills. My heart stopped. Jennifer and I hadn't used birth control in years. We always used protection, and she never felt the need to be on the pill. I picked up the bottle, staring at it. By the time she came back into the room, I had already put it down. She took her phone, answered the call, and walked off to another room. I sat there, staring at nothing. Something wasn't right. Something was really wrong. And I was running out of excuses to ignore it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there next to Jennifer, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The birth control pills. The secrecy around her job. The vague answers. The way she dressed differently for work. The matching tattoo. And the underground place my friend had talked about. I needed answers. Jennifer had always left her phone unlocked, but tonight, when I tried to check, I saw she had set a password. That was new. I sat up, staring at the phone in my hand. She had never used a password before. The fact that she had one now meant she was actively hiding something. I put the phone down and quietly got out of bed. There was one last thing I could try. Downstairs, in the hallway closet, we had an old, half-broken phone we hadn't used in years. It had a cracked screen and was painfully slow, but there was a chance her old accounts were still logged in. I powered it on and waited. The screen flickered to life, sluggish but functional. I went straight to the messaging app, my heart pounding. And then, I found them. Hundreds of messages between Jennifer and her friend. I scrolled, reading, my hands gripping the phone so tightly I thought I might crack it in half. She knew I was getting suspicious. She had taken a few days off work, on purpose, just in case I tried to check up on her. She had planned for this. The messages between her and her friend made it clear that they had been covering for each other. The talk of fulfilling wishes for men suddenly had a much darker meaning. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to process what I had just uncovered. Jennifer was lying to me. And worse, I had a sickening feeling I knew exactly what she was doing. I placed the old phone back where I found it and went upstairs, slipping into bed beside her as if nothing had happened. She stirred slightly but didn't wake up. I lay there, listening to her breathe, feeling nothing but cold, hard betrayal. This wasn't my wife. This was a woman who had been lying to me for God knows how long. I had a plan now. I was going to catch her in the act. The next morning, Jennifer got ready for work like usual. She kissed me goodbye, smiling like nothing was wrong. As soon as she left, I grabbed my car keys and called my lawyer. I wanted to start the divorce process today. I wasn't about to stay married to a woman who hid this kind of secret from me. After speaking with the attorney, I moved my personal savings to a separate account, one Jennifer had no access to. Then, I called my parents and let them know what was going on. They were furious, but they promised to support me. I searched the house, looking for anything else she might have hidden. And that's when I found it. Behind an old coat in the closet, stuffed into a pocket, was a thick stack of cash. I flipped through it. It was thousands of dollars. Jennifer had been hiding money. I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening around the bills. She had planned everything. She had been stashing away money, lying about where she worked, covering her tracks. Why? I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. That evening, Jennifer came home acting like everything was fine. I forced myself to play along. I smiled, I made small talk. I needed her to believe I wasn't suspicious anymore. She mentioned she had plans the next evening to catch up with her friend. Perfect. I told her to have a great time. She had no idea what was coming. The next night, as soon as she left, I grabbed the divorce papers and got in my car. I followed her. She drove across town, parking near a familiar-looking building. The underground place my friend had told me about. I parked down the street and waited. 30 minutes later, I stepped out of my car and walked inside. Jennifer's friend was sitting at the reception desk. When she saw me, her face went pale. "We're closed," she blurted out. I ignored her. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice cold. She stepped in front of me. "You really shouldn't be here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Especially since you're married." I clenched my jaw. I pushed past her and walked down the dimly lit hallway. And then I saw it. A row of men, waiting in line. I walked further, my hands shaking. And then, through one of the openings in the wall, I saw it, a familiar ankle, with the same matching tattoo she had gotten with her friend. I felt my heart stop. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the divorce papers. My hands were steady now. I pushed them through the opening, letting them fall at her feet. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I turned around and walked out, ignoring the stares from the men around me. I pushed past them, out the door, into my car. I drove home in silence. When I got there, I grabbed a suitcase and started throwing her things inside. By the time I heard her car pull into the driveway, I was done. She stormed inside, her face red with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed. I looked at her, completely calm. "I'm packing your stuff." She shook her head furiously. "You had no right to go there." I scoffed. "I had every right. I'm your husband. Or at least I was." Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. "I'm not signing anything," she spat. I shrugged. "I don't need your permission. The divorce is happening, whether you like it or not." I grabbed the suitcase and walked past her, heading toward the door. That's when she snapped. She lunged for a knife from the kitchen counter, her hands shaking. "You're making a huge mistake," she growled. Put my stuff back. Right. Now. I didn't even flinch. I took a step toward her, my voice steady. Put it down. She hesitated. I moved fast, grabbing her wrist and twisting just enough to make her drop the knife. She struggled, screaming, but I didn't let go. I dragged her toward the hallway storage closet, shoved her inside, and slammed the door shut. I locked it. She pounded against the door, cursing at me, but I ignored her. I called the police. By the time they arrived, she was still screaming inside the closet. They took her away, kicking and thrashing. I watched in silence as the squad car drove off. The divorce was finalized soon after. Jennifer didn't fight it. She didn't even try. She had nothing left. She had lost her job, her money, and any chance of manipulating me ever again. A few weeks later, she showed up at my door, looking desperate. "I have nothing," she whispered. "Please, can't we fix this?" I looked at her for a long moment. Then I closed the door in her face. She was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally free. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.